Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Regressive Soapbox. So this is going to be a 420. Blaze one if you got them. Blaze one if you got it. I haven't did one of these for a few days, so this is going to be a 420. One of my subscribers, one of my patrons actually, asked me to do a conversation about Žižek, Slavoj Žižek. I may be pronouncing the first name wrong. But Žižek is this Slovenian philosopher. The guy is amazing. I've loved the guy for a while, for about a year now. Chomsky hates the guy, which is comical to me. But Žižek hits upon really interesting dilemmas that deal with culture and ideology. So the question became, Žižek, in one of his new books, and this is going to be short because I haven't necessarily been able to see the book itself. I've heard him give lectures on it, but I haven't necessarily been able to see the book. But he says something to the effect of, I'd sell my mother into slavery or into bondage to know what the day after the revolution looks like. Meaning, the day after V for Vendetta, all these people are in this glorious, emancipatory, the government is off our back, the yoke is off our neck. Ultimately, we're going to do something different. And at the end of the film, each and every person, you see the destruction of power, of state, in that sense. And you see each and every person wearing that particular Fogax mask, that mask. This representation of each and every one of us are individual aspects of the revolution, the thing that toppled this particular system, that toppled the order of things, the way the current order of things is arranged. And we ourselves are going to embark on something new and something different. All right. Fair enough. Now, that's a beautiful experience. That's an experience that wherever you are on the political spectrum, there is a sort of, yes, change it. Let's topple the system. Now, Žižek asks the interesting question. What happens on day two? What happens on day two? You've had this emancipatory experience. Everybody is in the streets. Everybody is saying, this is done. We are going to have a new order of things. All right? Day two. You get up that morning. What's next? What does that day look like when you get up the very next day? This is an interesting question. And this is a question that needs to be answered if you're going to be part of this group of, we need a revolution. Now, I consider myself part of this group of, we need a change. We need a new order of things. Fair enough. Where I disagree with Žižek on is, there's no capacity of the left to accommodate this. That's why I disagree with him on. I would make the argument that my catalog of videos hits at this point of the vehicle to which we have in this country, meaning the left, is not adequate to deal with the problems that we're faced with. Nor is the right. The right is more pathetic in this sense, and they pretend that the problems don't exist. The left, at the very least, acknowledges some of the issues, but they don't do necessarily anything substantively to actually deal with those issues. That's my big complaint about the left. Now, in that particular case, Žižek is right. They don't necessarily have any vehicle whatsoever to deal with the problems to which we're presented with. And they take this idea of ideology to kind of paper over these things. So it's, so I give you an example. The refugees flooding into Europe. Well, the leftists, or the liberal line is, well, these people are coming from a place that's disastrous and everything else. We need to show them compassion. They're, you know, it's not their fault. They don't necessarily have an issue of agency, etc., etc. Anything that you say in the sense of, well, wait a minute, these people are somewhat of a threat when they're coming into the country this way. They're leaving this war-torn area, that's a problem. So the right argument is, I don't want these people in my country. The leftist argument is, if you're saying anything about these people coming into the country, you're racist. Both of those positions are ridiculous. Both are ridiculous. And both have an element of truth to it, if that makes sense. So yes, there will be threats for people coming over to the country. Conservatives are right. There's nothing wrong with admitting that, yes, if you're bringing somebody from a war-torn country, what is going to be the person who comes from that particular war-torn country? And are there going to be certain ideologies that that person is accustomed to, even if they weren't part of the people who are in that military thing? Meaning, is there going to be an ideological clash between individuals from that particular country, let's say Syria, and the individuals in a different country, let's say Germany, or let's say some aspect of Europe? Yes. Is that justification to not let them in from that? No. No. That's my point. Both have elements of truth, but both take this ideological stance that doesn't necessarily deal with the reality of the situation. It's like, yes, These people are coming from a war-torn area. Yes, in those situations, people going through tragedy are not necessarily the bestest people on the planet. Those people have, who they are gets mangled in the process of survival. Bake that into the cake. You also had this thing of there's a competing ideology where, yeah, some of these people are going to be religious. They're going to be uber religious. And you're putting them into a culture that's somewhat secular. So yes, there's going to be clashes of civilization in that point. Acknowledging the reality of those things don't in any way make you racist. Nor does acknowledging any of those things mean that you should not deal with the humanitarian crisis of letting those people into the country. It's just being aware. It's just being aware. Both things can be true. They don't have to necessarily eat each other. You can't have a situation where, yes, I acknowledge that there's a threat by bringing people into the country who are ideologically different. But yes, I also recognize that the situation to which they're in is ghastly and we need to do something. I also recognize that ultimately we've had, at least in the United States, and I would make the argument Britain, a hand in causing that. We had a hand in causing that. When you destroy one country, killing 1 million people, those people flood into various regions of the other countries, including disbanding the military. I mean, you had military personnel that were in one government fleeing into other governments. The United States paying terrorists to undermine the Syrian regime at the exact same token while people were flooding because of the war zone. You don't see the connection in these things of our influence in the Middle East and the tragedies that have assailed the Middle East. It's not, oh, those people just need to get themselves together. It's we're taking in hand and doing things that are adversely affecting those governments. That's the honest position. So yes, as those people stream on into Europe, yes, we should accommodate some of the people in the United States. We took a hand in causing it. Yes, Europe should accommodate those people coming from Syria. Just from a human level, yes. But that doesn't necessarily mean acknowledging the problems associated with doing that. This isn't a perfect world. Yes, you're going to have quagmires associated with things that you must do from a humanitarian standpoint. But there's still dangers in doing that. You just have to be aware of it and acknowledge it. And ideology can't paper over it. That's somewhat of a detour. What I'm getting at is, in the same way this ideological thing plays into this particular case, the Syrian case, it also plays into this idea of revolution. Conservatives have an idea of revolution. Liberals have an idea of revolution. But nobody likes to talk about what happens on day 2. What happens on day 2? I'd argue that I don't want a revolution in the emancipatory, all hell breaks loose state. I don't want that. I don't think it's necessary. I think, personally, and this is where I slightly differ with him on, you can have a political vehicle, but the vehicles that we have in the United States just don't accommodate what needs to take place. Meaning, look, you can have a revolution in 2 ways. You could say, I'm going to be overt, I'm going to be powerful, and I'm going to overthrow the system by force. I'm going to have the Batman instinct. I'm going to go outside the confines of the system. I'm going to topple the system, and I'm going to instruct a new order of things. That is going to get a lot of people killed. That is going to be bloody. But you may achieve your objectives. Soviet Revolution, those type of things, where the Bolshevik Revolution. Or France, the whole liberty thing, when Napoleon takes over at that point, and essentially it's not enough for France to be, we're liberty in France and we're going to go against the monarchs. It's every other place also needs to be free, and we're going to marshal our forces in France to attack all these other countries. So yeah, revolutions are unseemly. Look at the thing in Egypt, the Arab Spring. In many of those cases, you still ended up with the elements of the prior system still regaining control of the system. What happens on day 2? I'd argue it's a false choice. You don't want a day 2. If you're at the point where you need that revolution, something is going massively wrong with your particular society, means the levers of power that would allow you to change that society are non-existent. Otherwise, people wouldn't necessarily take that extra step of going outside the system to do it. Meaning, as long as those levers are in place, there is a means by which for a faction of a society to change how that society is arranged. It's not necessarily that it's easy, it's just the means need to exist. I would argue that Donald Trump being elected to some degree, as ghastly as I know people want to think it is an indication that those levers are still there. Trump was hated by the media establishment. He was hated by the political class. Guess who's president? Donald Trump. Donald Trump. I don't like the guy. You already know how I feel about the guy. But is that some indication that, yes, whatever those levers are that allows us the peaceful overthrow of governments, which is what elections are, can you do that within those confines? I would argue yes. But there's this added bonus of, but you can't say that that's what you're doing. It needs to be unacknowledged. It needs to be one of those things that you function in the shadows with this idea of using the levers themselves to change things. But it needs to be immensely unacknowledged in regards to what you're attempting to do. So, yes, I am trying to overthrow capitalism. Yes, one policy after the next is going to be innocuous. It's going to fix things, but it's going to be monstrous in regards to the capitalistic system itself, in regards to its implications. If you have a capitalistic model that, for the most part, says, because of scarcity, meaning because people down on the economic chain are dealing with scarcity, real world scarcity, these people are in constant threat of being without. If your survival is at stake and you've based survival into this monetary system, you need money to survive, and now you don't have enough. You're always in a perpetual state of not necessarily having enough. At any particular point, you know you can go hungry, you know you can lose your home. You've seen enough people at the bottom of the spectrum to understand the situation to which you're presented with. What are you going to do to receive the cash necessary to do the things that you need to survive and to maintain your decision space? I'd argue that having a model that way allows one faction of it, the elites, to control the bottom half based upon their own scarcity. You don't need a whip. You don't need a chain. You can use their own frailty and scarcity as a means of controlling that bottom population. You don't want to do what we say? Fine. You don't want to work at plantation? Fine. You don't eat. You don't have anywhere to stay. You sleep on the street. You're going to be castigated by the society itself that you are a do-nothing. You're a lazy bum, and the system or the situation to which you find yourself in regards to being in desperate poverty is your own fault. You weren't meritorious enough. This is ideology at work. What I'm getting at is you can still function within a system. The day after a political revolution is a ghastly day. It's a ghastly day. I don't believe that political revolutions go the way that people think they tend to go. I think those things are chaos. And I think you have a lot of factions that are trying to eat themselves to be the faction in charge. So yes, you have a political revolution. That's great. Now, what happens? You have systems of the old guard that are in place. What are you going to do with those systems? Are you going to off the heads of the capitalists who are controlling so much public land or so much land and so many resources? What are you going to do? How are you going to deal with that? What are you going to deal with the population that's dissenting from the things that you're saying and you're doing? For that matter, who's in charge of that particular revolution? Any system of state is going to be, to some degree, against the individual. It's just the way it is. The system state requires a certain level of conformity, meaning any state that you build immediately is going to put you at odds with the individual. Any revolution that you have, particularly if there is some creation of state that's associated with it or some reorganization of state, maintains the same problem of state versus individual liberty. It's built into the fabric of state. If you're going to have a weak state and strong individual liberties, then the state is not going to be able to deal with the situations to which it presents. It's presented. And beyond that, I would argue that that state will try to accrue more power. The power that it's accruing, because understand, power is not a vacuum. There has to be some medium of force. Meaning, to say somebody has power what does it mean? Power in what capacity? Power in what sense? Power in this capacity is treaded against individual liberties. Whatever the space in which state and individual, for the most part, agree and function and flow, that decision space, they're in the same sandbox. Meaning, an increase in power of state is a decrease in power of the individual that's associated with it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. The society itself can organize it in a way that's to the betterment of the individuals in that society. That does not necessarily mean that you would have some individuals that don't agree with the state. You will. So you would always have friction in any capacity of state, however you arrange it. The biggest thing is to have the state to have the means to reorganize itself based upon a prevailing wind, which is what I'd argue is Vendetta, meaning that mechanism didn't exist in that model. I would argue the mechanism in our model still exists. Žižek is right. I'd sell my mother to see what the day two of revolution. But I have to be honest, I don't want to be a part of it. I would not want to be in that particular society going through that particular revolution because I think your head could be on a chopping block. If you have the capacity to change it politically, do it politically and do it within the system. You never have to utter the words capitalism, but you damn sure need to know that that is your enemy and that is your threat. And ultimately, the model itself, this anonymous faceless model that compels people to behave in particular ways has avatars of its representation. The politician getting $1 billion to run an election and doing whatever necessary for that $1 billion. The media broadcasting company that's owned by a particular corporation, that's owned by a particular person, that parrots a particular line that doesn't in any way challenge the system to which we find ourselves. The same media organization that sees the majority of the country being in poverty, the richest country in the world, and passes it by. And instead talks about issues that in no way directly affects those particular people. Like I'm making this point that capital runs through our system. It's like the lifeblood of the system. And yet this idea of class struggle, class rights, class warfare is off the table, even though class warfare is what has been taking place for the past 50, 60, 70 years. Look at your wages. Look at productivity. Look at where those gains are going. Look at the war in regards to these trade deals, meaning the fact that you've opened the workspace where you can have other people all across the world work in a particular thing means you as a worker in an individual country has now been lessened. Your job can be outsourced. If you get a little bit unruly, if you're getting on my nerves, if you guys are trying to have a union, you guys are trying to get higher wages, fine. Have it your way. I'm leaving the United States, so I'm shipping that job overseas, and all of you people are fired. And I'm going to pay these people $3. I'm going to get the same level of productivity, and I'm going to pocket all of those profits. Yes, I'm going to automate this process, and yes, I'm going to fire you. Because that automation is not going to bitch about healthcare. It's not going to bitch about being tired or sick or ill or having a kid or all. Not going to bitch. That computer, that automaton is going to be there, and it's going to make my productivity go up. It's going to make my profit stable and in my pocket, and I don't have to give that to anybody else. This is a situation to which you're dealing with. The system itself compels certain behavior. That is behavior that's compelled and prodded on by the system. There is no person moving the pieces. The system itself is software. It compels behavior. Meaning just the normal operation of the system, the normal way in which it functions, it compels the behavior. You need to know that. You can't just move arbitrarily to the left. Any vehicle of the left that seeks to have a revolution, a political revolution, seeks to motivate people, A, to understand their problem, even if they don't fully grasp it in the same way that you do. At the very least, understand that there's a problem. To B, marshal those people. To take political power. And once you take political power, even though you may never utter the words capitalism, you may never utter the words overchanging the system, you may never utter the words revolution. But one policy after the next is going in to destroy the planks of capitalism to the point where it undermines the influence of cash in our lives. Your revolution is internal, it's not external. If you reach the point of an external revolution, then day two is going to be monstrous. It's going to be monstrous. Žižek is wrong on this. But Žižek is making this a sandbox thing of saying what happens on day two. People want this glorious revolution, this emancipatory experience. People feel some way about it. What happens on day two? It's a fair question. It's a question you need to answer. I'd argue, though, that you don't have to go that route. Yes, you don't need to necessarily say what your intentions are, but yes, you can put in policies that are innocuous, that are helpful. So for instance, universal basic income. If you want to try to find a way to stop people from being focused purely on their lives and their needs, make sure their needs are met. Get those people, A, on your side politically, meaning your universal basic income is under threat of these guys. Automation and everything else means that there will never be enough jobs to compensate for the number of people who need to work. Universal basic income is a middle ground between those things. No, we haven't gotten rid of capitalism. Capitalism is still going all in well, but now capitalism is being to the benefit of everybody else. It's been to the benefit of everyone else. Take the next step, federal job guarantee. Again, you decimate this idea of scarcity. So if in the capitalistic model, people are being controlled by scarcity, meaning you're not going to have enough to eat, you're not going to have anywhere to stay, you're not going to have any food clean water to drink. You're not going to have your needs met unless you do what we tell you to do and pick a plantation on which to work. If there's a federal job guarantee, right off the bat, you're no longer coupled with this idea of private enterprise. You now, at the worst case scenario, get a job with the government doing something to the benefit of everyone. That's a better alternative. That person is not trapped and that person is not stuck in poverty. That person will never be impoverished if that person has the capacity to work. With the universal basic income added to the federal job guarantee, you've eliminated poverty in your society. those people are now going to be more politically active and more politically inclined, particularly towards a leftist perspective, because at the very least they were fully aware of the scarcity model to which they existed before versus the model to which they exist now, in which their needs on a basic level are being met. You've expanded the political playing field. You've developed a large number of people who are in your camp, and you've decimated poverty. And, to the added bonus, you've decimated a plank of control of the capitalistic model. You just need to know who your threat is, know who your problem is, know who the person you're trying to go after, or in this case, the anonymous thing that you're trying to go after. You don't necessarily need a political revolution in the sense of this going outside the system and destroying the system and remolding it. The system has the tools to which can be remolded internally. That's what I'm saying. I'm going to do another one of these when I read this chapter. But I did want to touch on this. It's 420. Let me know what you think. What happens on a day 2 of revolution? And do you think I'm right? Do you necessarily need that day 2 of a revolution? Let me know what you think. All right, guys. Thank you.